I've earned 30 plus certifications, and I'm here to guide you to success on your exam. Welcome to the Ultimate AZ-204 Exam Masterclass. Are you ready to crack the AZ-204 exam in one go? You're in the right place. In this session, we'll arm you with powerful insights and hand-picked questions that can make all the difference in your exam performance. We've scanned the web using intelligent crawlers to gather the most critical and high-impact questions, all compiled into one powerful PDF resource. You can download it from the link in the description. Not only will we explore these must-practice questions, but we'll also share real exam experiences and pro tips to give you that competitive edge. Let's dive into the key questions that could shape your success. Question 1. You have two Hyper-V hosts named Host 1 and Host 2. Host 1 has an Azure virtual machine named VM1 that was deployed by using a custom Azure resource manager template. You need to move VM1 to Host 2. What should you do? A. From the Update Management blade, click Enable. B. From the Overview blade, move VM1 to a different subscription. C. From the Redeploy blade, click Redeploy. D. From the Profile blade, modify the usage location. Correct answer, C. From the Redeploy blade, click Redeploy. Explanation. Redeploying an Azure VM moves it to a new underlying host while preserving configuration, disks, and networking, making it the supported method for resolving host-level issues. Question 2. Your company has an Azure Kubernetes Service (AKS) cluster that you manage from an Azure AD join device. The cluster is located in a resource group. Developers have created an application named MyApp. MyApp was packaged into a container image. You need to deploy the YAML manifest file for the application. Solution: you install the Azure CLI on the device and run the kubectl apply fmyapp.yaml command. Does this meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. Correct answer A. Yes. Explanation. Azure CLI provides authentication to AKS, and kubectl apply is the standard Kubernetes command for deploying YAML manifests to create or update cluster resources. Question 3. Your company has an Azure Kubernetes Service (AKS) cluster that you manage from an Azure AD join device. The cluster is located in a resource group. Developers have created an application named MyApp. MyApp was packaged into a container image. You need to deploy the YAML manifest file for the application. Solution: you install the Docker client on the device and run the Docker run at Microsoft/Azure CLI 0.10.17 command. Does this meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. Correct answer B. No. Explanation. Running Azure CLI inside Docker does not automatically configure kubectl access to the AKS cluster, so it cannot deploy Kubernetes manifests without additional setup. Question 4. Your company has a web app named WebApp1. You use the WebJobs SDK to design a triggered app service background task that automatically invokes a function in the code every time new data is received in a queue. You are preparing to configure the service processes a queue data item. Which of the following is the service you should use? A. Logic apps. B. WebJobs. C. Flow. D. Functions. Correct answer B. WebJobs. Explanation. Azure WebJobs are designed for background tasks and app service and integrate natively with queues, timers, and triggers using the WebJobs SDK. Question 5. Your company has an Azure subscription. You need to deploy a number of Azure virtual machines to the subscription by using Azure Resource Manager (ARM) templates. The virtual machines will be included in a single availability set. You need to ensure that the ARM template allows for as many virtual machines as possible to remain accessible in the event of fabric failure or maintenance. Which of the following is the value that you should configure for the platform fault domain count property? A. 10. B. 30. C. Min value. D. Max value. Correct answer D. Max value. Explanation. Configuring the maximum platform fault domain count spreads virtual machines across more physical hardware, increasing resilience and ensuring maximum availability during hardware or rack failures. Question 6. Your company has an Azure subscription. You need to deploy a number of Azure virtual machines to the subscription by using Azure Resource Manager (ARM) templates. The virtual machines will be included in a single availability set. You need to ensure that the ARM template allows for as many virtual machines as possible to remain accessible in the event of fabric failure or maintenance. Which of the following is the value that you should configure for the platform update domain count property? A. 10. B. 20. C. 30. D. 40. Correct answer B. 20. Explanation. Azure supports a maximum of 20 update domains. Using this value minimizes service impact during planned maintenance by reducing the number of VMs updated simultaneously. Question 7. This question requires that you evaluate the underlined text to determine if it is correct. Your company has an on-premises deployment of MongoDB and an Azure Cosmos DB account that makes use of the MongoDB API. You need to devise a strategy to migrate MongoDB to the Azure Cosmos DB account. You include the Data Management Gateway tool in your migration strategy. Instructions: review the underlined text. If it makes the statement correct, select No Change Required. If the statement is incorrect, select the answer choice that makes the statement correct. A. No change required. B. MongoStore. C. Azure Storage Explorer. D. AZ-copy. Correct answer B. MongoStore. Explanation. MongoStore is the correct tool for importing MongoDB backups into Azure Cosmos DB using the MongoDB API, making Data Management Gateway unnecessary. Question 8. You are developing an e-commerce web app. You want to use Azure Key Vault to ensure that sign-ins to the e-commerce web app are secured by using Azure App Service Authentication and Azure Active Directory AAD. What should you do on the e-commerce web app? A. Run the AZ Key Vault secret command. B. Enable Azure AD Connect. C. Enable Managed Service Identity (MSI). D. Create an Azure AD Service Principal. Correct answer C. Enable Managed Service Identity (MSI). Explanation. Managed Service Identity allows the web app to authenticate securely to Azure Key Vault using Azure AD without storing secrets or credentials in application code. Question 9. This question requires that you evaluate the underlined text to determine if it is correct. Your Azure Active Directory Azure AD tenant has an Azure subscription linked to it. Your developer has created a mobile application that obtains Azure AD access tokens using the OAuth 2 implicit grant type. The mobile application must be registered in Azure AD. You require a redirect URI from the developer for registration purposes. Instructions: review the underlined text. If it makes the statement correct, select No Change is needed. If the statement is incorrect, select the answer choice that makes the statement correct. A. No change required. B. A secret. C. A login hint. D. A client ID. Correct answer A. No change required. Explanation. OAuth 2.0 implicit grant flow requires a redirect URI for token return, making the statement accurate and requiring no change to the existing configuration. Question 10. You are creating an Azure Key Vault using PowerShell. Objects deleted from the Key Vault must be kept for a set period of 90 days. Which two of the following parameters must be used in conjunction to meet the requirement? Choose two. A. Enabled for deployment. B. Enable purge protection. C. Enabled for template deployment. D. Enable soft delete. Correct answer, B and D. Enable purge protection. Enable soft delete. Explanation. Soft delete allows recovery of deleted Key Vault objects, while purge protection enforces retention by preventing permanent deletion before the configured retention period expires. Question 11. You manage an Azure SQL database that allows for Azure AD authentication. You need to make sure that database developers can connect to the SQL database via Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, SSMS. You also need to make sure the developers use their on-premises Active Directory account for authentication. Your strategy should allow for authentication prompts to be kept to a minimum. Which of the following should you implement? A. Azure AD Token. B. Azure Multi-Factor Authentication. C. Active Directory Integrated Authentication. D. OETH Software Tokens. Correct answer, C. Active Directory Integrated Authentication. Explanation. Active Directory Integrated Authentication allows developers to use their on-premises credentials via SSMS, reducing authentication prompts and enabling seamless single sign-on. Question 12. You are developing an application to transfer data between on-premises file servers and Azure Blob Storage. The application stores keys, secrets, and certificates in Azure Key Vault and makes use of the Azure Key Vault APIs. You want to configure the application to allow recovery of an accidental deletion of the Key Vault or Key Vault objects for 90 days after deletion. What should you do? A. Run the add AZ Key Vault key complete. B. Run the AZ Key Vault update enable soft delete true enable purge protection true CLI. C. Implement virtual network service endpoints for Azure Key Vault. D. Run the AZ Key Vault update enable soft delete false CLI. Correct answer B. Run the AZ Key Vault update enable soft delete true enable purge protection true CLI. Explanation. Enabling soft delete and purge protection ensures deleted Key Vault objects can be recovered for 90 days and cannot be permanently deleted during the retention period. Question 13. Note: the question is included in a number of questions that depicts the identical setup. However, every question has a distinctive result. Establish if the solution satisfies the requirements. You are configuring a web app that delivers streaming video to users. The application makes use of continuous integration and deployment. You need to ensure that the application is highly available and that the user's streaming experience is constant. You also want to configure the application to store data in a geographic location that is nearest to the user. Solution: you include the use of Azure Redis Cache in your design. Does the solution meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. Correct answer B. No. Explanation. Azure Redis Cache improves performance but does not provide geo-replicated content delivery or location-based storage, making it unsuitable for global video streaming scenarios. Question 14. Note: the question is included in a number of questions that depicts the identical setup. However, every question has a distinctive result. Establish if the solution satisfies the requirements. You are configuring a web app that delivers streaming video to users. The application makes use of continuous integration and deployment. You need to ensure that the application is highly available and that the user's streaming experience is constant. You also want to configure the application to store data in a geographic location that is nearest to the user. Solution: you include the use of an Azure Content Delivery Network (CDN) in your design. Does the solution meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. Correct answer A. Yes. Explanation: Azure CDN caches content at edge locations closest to users, improving availability, reducing latency, and providing consistent streaming experiences across geographic regions. Question 15. Note: the question is included in a number of questions that depicts the identical setup. However, every question has a distinctive result. Establish if the solution satisfies the requirements. You are configuring a web app that delivers streaming video to users. The application makes use of continuous integration and deployment. You need to ensure that the application is highly available and that the user's streaming experience is constant. You also want to configure the application to store data in a geographic location that is nearest to the user. Solution: you include the use of a Storage Area Network (SAN) in your design. Does the solution meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. Correct answer B. No. Explanation: a SAN is not cloud-native and lacks global distribution, scalability, and edge caching capabilities required to support highly available, geographically optimized streaming applications. Question 16. You develop a web app on a Tier D1 app service plan. You notice that page load times increase during periods of peak traffic. You want to implement automatic scaling when CPU load is above 80%. Your solution must minimize costs. What should you do first? A. Enable auto-scaling on the web app. B. Switch to the Premium App Service Tier plan. C. Switch to the Standard App Service Tier plan. D. Switch to the Azure App Services Consumption plan. Correct answer, C. Switch to the Standard App Service Tier plan. Explanation: auto-scaling is unavailable on basic plans. Switching to the standard tier enables auto-scaling while minimizing costs compared to premium plans. Question 17. You are developing a .NET Core MVC application that allows customers to research independent holiday accommodation providers. You want to implement Azure Search to allow the application to search the index by using various criteria to locate documents related to accommodation. You want the application to allow customers to search the index by using regular expressions. What should you do? A. Configure the search mode property of the search parameters class. B. Configure the query type property of the search parameters class. C. Configure the facets property of the search parameters class. D. Configure the filter property of the search parameters class. Correct answer B. Configure the query type property of the search parameters class. Explanation: query type enables Lucene query syntax in Azure Search, which supports advanced search features including regular expressions and complex query patterns. Question 18. You are a developer at your company. You need to update the definitions for an existing logic app. What should you use? A. The Enterprise Integration Pack (EIP). B. The Logic App Code View. C. The API connections. D. The Logic Apps Designer. Correct answer B. The Logic App Code View. Explanation: Logic App Code View allows direct editing of the JSON workflow definition, making it ideal for updating existing Logic App logic and configurations. Question 19. Note: the question is included in a number of questions that depicts the identical setup. However, every question has a distinctive result. Establish if the solution satisfies the requirements. You are developing a solution for a public-facing API. The API backend is hosted in an Azure App Service instance. You have implemented a RESTful service for the API backend. You must configure backend authentication for the API Management Service instance. Solution: you configure basic gateway credentials for the Azure resource. Does the solution meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. Correct answer B. No. Explanation: basic gateway credentials are unsupported for Azure resources. Azure API Management requires managed identities or certificates for secure backend authentication. Question 20. Note: the question is included in a number of questions that depicts the identical setup. However, every question has a distinctive result. Establish if the solution satisfies the requirements. You are developing a solution for a public-facing API. The API backend is hosted in an Azure App Service instance. You have implemented a RESTful service for the API backend. You must configure backend authentication for the API Management Service instance. Solution: you configure client cert gateway credentials for the HTTP's endpoint. Does the solution meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. Correct answer A. Yes. Explanation: client certificate authentication is supported for HTTP endpoints and API management, providing a secure method for authenticating backend services. Question 21. Note: the question is included in a number of questions that depicts the identical setup. However, every question has a distinctive result. Establish if the solution satisfies the requirements. You are developing a solution for a public-facing API. The API backend is hosted in an Azure App Service instance. You have implemented a RESTful service for the API backend. You must configure backend authentication for the API Management Service instance. Solution: you configure basic gateway credentials for the HTTP's endpoint. Does the solution meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. Correct answer A. Yes. Explanation: basic authentication credentials can be configured for HTTP backends and API management, allowing secure communication between API management and backend services. Question 22. Note: the question is included in a number of questions that depicts the identical setup. However, every question has a distinctive result. Establish if the solution satisfies the requirements. You are developing a solution for a public-facing API. The API backend is hosted in an Azure App Service instance. You have implemented a RESTful service for the API backend. You must configure backend authentication for the API Management Service instance. Solution: you configure client cert gateway credentials for the Azure resource. Does the solution meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. Correct answer B. No. Explanation: Azure resources authenticate using Azure AD identities rather than client certificates, making client certificate gateway credentials unsuitable for Azure resource backends. Question 23. You are a developer at your company. You need to edit the workflows for an existing Logic app. What should you use? A. The Enterprise Integration Pack (EIP). B. The Logic App Code View. C. The API Connections. D. The Logic Apps Designer. Correct answer D. The Logic Apps Designer. Explanation: Logic Apps Designer provides a visual interface for editing workflows, making it the preferred tool for modifying triggers, actions, and control flow. Question 24. You have an Azure Queue storage account that contains a queue named Q1. You plan to use Azure SDK for .NET to develop a solution that uses Q1. You need to author C# code that will return an approximate number of messages in Q1. Your solution must minimize the development effort. Which method should you use in your code? A. getProperties method of the QClient class. B. getProperties method of the QService client class. C. peakMessages method of the QClient class. D. getStatistics method of the QService client class. Correct answer A. getProperties method of the QClient class. Explanation. QClient.getProperties retrieves metadata including approximate message count, offering a simple and efficient method without requiring message retrieval. Question 25. You are developing an Azure durable function to manage an online ordering process. The process must call an external API to gather product discount information. You need to implement the Azure durable function. Which Azure durable function types should you use? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Note: each correct selection is worth 1 point. A. Orchestrator. B. Entity. C. Client. D. Activity. Correct answer A and B. Orchestrator. Entity. Explanation. The orchestrator coordinates workflow execution, while activity functions perform tasks such as calling external APIs, ensuring separation of orchestration logic and business operations. Question 26. You develop Azure durable functions to manage vehicle loans. The loan process includes multiple actions that must be run in a specified order. One of the actions includes a customer credit check process, which may require multiple days to process. You need to implement Azure durable functions for the loan process. Which Azure durable functions type should you use? A. Orchestrator. B. Client. C. Entity. D. Activity. Correct answer A. Orchestrator. Explanation. Orchestrator functions manage long-running workflows, preserve state, and ensure ordered execution, making them ideal for processes involving delays like credit checks. Question 27. You are developing several microservices to run on Azure Container Apps. External HTTP ingress traffic has been enabled for the microservices. The microservices must be deployed to the same virtual network and write logs to the same log analytics workspace. You need to deploy the microservices. What should you do? A. Enable single revision mode. B. Use a separate environment for each container. C. Use a private container registry image and single image for all containers. D. Use a single environment for all containers. E. Enable multiple revision mode. Correct answer D. Use a single environment for all containers. Explanation. Using a single container apps environment ensures shared virtual networking and log analytics workspace, simplifying deployment and enabling centralized monitoring. Question 28. You are developing a microservice to run on Azure Container Apps for a company. External HTTP ingress traffic has been enabled. The company requires that updates to the microservice must not cause downtime. You need to deploy an update to the microservices. What should you do? A. Enable single revision mode. B. Use multiple environments for each container. C. Use a private container registry and single image for all containers. D. Use a single environment for all containers. E. Enable multiple revision mode. Correct answer E. Enable multiple revision mode. Explanation. Multiple revision mode allows new versions to run alongside existing ones, enabling traffic splitting and zero downtime deployments during microservice updates. Question 29. Note, this question is part of a series of questions that present the same scenario. Each question in the series contains a unique solution that might meet the stated goals. Some question sets might have more than one correct solution, while others might not have a correct solution. After you answer a question in this section, you will not be able to return to it. As a result, these questions will not appear in the review screen. You have an Azure App Service plan named APS Plan 1 set to the basic B1 pricing tier. APS Plan 1 contains an app service web app named Web App 1. You plan to enable schedule-based auto-scaling for APS Plan 1. You need to minimize the cost of running Web App 1. Solution: scale out APS Plan 1. Does the solution meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. Correct answer B. No. Explanation: scaling out increases resource usage and cost, which contradicts the requirement to minimize operational expenses while enabling schedule-based auto-scaling. Question 30. You are developing a microservices-based application that uses Azure Container Apps. The application consists of several containerized services that handle tasks, such as processing orders, managing inventory, and generating reports. You deploy a new revision of the Processing Orders app. Processing orders must be triggered by a web request and must always be available based on incoming web requests. You need to validate that the replica is ready to handle incoming requests. What should you implement? A. HTTP Readiness Probe. B. TCP Readiness Probe. C. HTTP Startup Probe. D. TCP Liveness Probe. E. HTTP Liveness Probe. Correct answer A. HTTP Readiness Probe. Explanation: HTTP readiness probes verify whether a container instance can accept traffic, ensuring requests are routed only to healthy and fully initialized replicas. Question 31. You are developing an Azure Function app for scalability and integration with Azure Blob Storage. You must run the code in an Azure production environment that allows the function to scale based on demand, providing instance size selection and higher concurrency control. The function must connect to other Azure services secured inside a virtual network, scale to 0 instances when there are no incoming events, and minimize costs. You need to select a hosting plan to meet the requirement. Which plan should you use? A. Flex consumption. B. Consumption. C. Premium. D. Dedicated. Correct answer A. Flex consumption. Explanation: Flex consumption supports scaling to 0, VNet integration, higher concurrency control, and cost efficiency, making it ideal for production-grade Azure functions. Question 32. You plan to deploy an Azure Container app. You need to configure the Container app to support session affinity. Which ingress type and revision mode should you assign to the Container app? A. HTTP ingress type and multiple revision mode. B. HTTP ingress type and single revision mode. C. TCP ingress type and multiple revision mode. D. TCP ingress type and single revision mode. Correct answer B. HTTP ingress type and single revision mode. Explanation: Session affinity requires HTTP ingress and single revision mode to ensure requests from the same client are consistently routed to the same container instance. Question 33. You are building a website that uses Azure Blob Storage for data storage. You configure Azure Blob Storage lifecycle to move all blobs to the archive tier after 30 days. Customers have requested a service level agreement, SLA, for viewing data older than 30 days. You need to document the minimum SLA for data recovery. Which SLA should you use? A. At least 2 days. B. Between 1 and 15 hours. C. At least 1 day. D. Between 0 and 60 minutes. Correct answer B. Between 1 and 15 hours. Explanation. Azure Blob Archive to rehydration can take between 1 and 15 hours, defining the minimum SLA for accessing archive data. Question 34. You develop Azure solutions. A .NET application needs to receive a message each time an Azure virtual machine finishes processing data. The messages must not persist after being processed by the receiving application. You need to implement the .NET object that will receive the messages. Which object should you use? A. Queue client. B. Subscription client. C. Topic client. D. Cloud queue client. Correct answer A. Queue client. Explanation. Queue client processes Azure queue messages that are removed after successful processing, ensuring messages do not persist once consumed. Question 35. You develop Azure solutions. You must connect to a NoSQL globally distributed database by using the .NET API. You need to create an object to configure and execute requests in the database. Which code segment should you use? A. New container, endpoint URI primary key. B. New database, endpoint URI primary key. C. New Cosmos client, endpoint URI primary key. Correct answer, C. New Cosmos client, endpoint URI primary key. Explanation. Cosmos client is the primary entry point for configuring connections and executing operations against Azure Cosmos DB using the .NET SDK. Question 36. You have an existing Azure storage account that stores large volumes of data across multiple containers. You need to copy all data from the existing storage account to a new storage account. The copy process must meet the following requirements. Automate data movement. Minimize user input required to perform the operation. Ensure that the data movement process is recoverable. What should you use? A. AZ copy. B. Azure Storage Explorer. C. Azure Portal. D. .NET Storage Client Library. Correct answer A. AZ copy. Explanation. AZ copy supports automated, resumable, high-performance data transfers, making it ideal for copying large volumes of data between storage accounts. Question 37. An organization deploys Azure Cosmos DB. You need to ensure that the index is updated as items are created, updated, or deleted. What should you do? A. Set the indexing mode to lazy. B. Set the value of the automatic property of the indexing policy to false. C. Set the value of the enable scan inquiry option to true. D. Set the indexing mode to consistent. Correct answer D. Set the indexing mode to consistent. Explanation. Consistent indexing ensures that index updates occur immediately after data changes, guaranteeing accurate and up-to-date query results. Question 38. You create and publish a new Azure App Service web app. User authentication and authorization must use Azure Active Directory, Azure AD. You need to configure authentication and authorization. What should you do first? A. Add an identity provider. B. Map an existing custom DNS name. C. Create and configure a new app setting. D. Add a private certificate. E. Create and configure a managed identity. Correct answer A. Add an identity provider. Explanation. Adding Azure AD as an identity provider is the first step in enabling authentication and authorization for an Azure App Service application. Question 39. You have a Linux container-based console application that uploads image files from customer sites all over the world. A backend system that runs on Azure virtual machines processes the images by using the Azure Blobs API. You are not permitted to make changes to the application. Some customer sites only have phone-based internet connections. You need to configure the console application to access the images. What should you use? A. Azure Blob Fuse. B. Azure Disks. C. Azure Storage Network File System, NFS 3.0 support. D. Azure Files. Correct answer A. Azure Blob Fuse. Explanation. Azure Blob Fuse mounts blob storage as a file system on Linux, enabling applications to access blobs without code changes, even over low bandwidth connections. Question 40. A company uses an Azure Blob storage for archiving. The company requires that data in the blob storage is only in the archive tier. You need to ensure data copied to the blob storage is moved to the archive tier. What should you do? A. Use a put block list operation with a request header of XMS immutability policy mode. B. Create a lifecycle policy with an action of tier to archive and configure days after modification greater than for 0. C. Use a put blob operation with a request header of XMS immutability policy until date. D. Create a lifecycle policy with an action of tier to archive and configure a filter for blob index match. Correct answer B. Create a lifecycle policy with an action of tier to archive and configure days after modification greater than for 0. Explanation. Lifecycle policies automatically move blobs to the archive tier, and configuring 0 days ensures data is archived immediately upon upload. Please revise full PDF 2 to 3 times for 100% success. Check the description for the PDF download link and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for upcoming episodes. Thank you.